Hey everyone. I've been getting a lot of inquiries about the trend line strategy that I use on my charts. People watch me on live trading that I do on YouTube when I trade the Tokyo closing session at 12:30 p.m. Indochina time. That's in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Southeast Asia. So if you want to see how I actually use the trendline strategy live on my charts, taking profitable trades, the link to join the YouTube channel is below this video. But I'm going to give a basic tutorial here of how to set up the trendline strategy and how I use it. All right, so let's jump over to the Tradingview charts and get started. As you can see, we are on the Euro-US chart, and this is the monthly chart. The trendline strategy is a top-down analysis. You start at the monthly chart, then go to the weekly, then the daily, then the 4-hour, and then the 1 hour, and a shorter time frame if that's what you trade from. I use the 10-minute time frame. But you start with the monthly chart. And what we're going to do is, this is the very beginning of the Euro-US. This was back in 1971, a long time ago. And we set up our first trend line, which would be the upward trend line. And I use the ray tool, all right, not the trend line tool. Use the ray tool, and I start here at the very bottom, the very first point that I find, and draw it to the next touch point, which might be right over here or here. Looks like that's a good one. And the color for the upward trend line I use is green. All right, so that's our first trend line, and we can look in here and see if that's the correct touch point. I might want to move it over to this lower touch point. I can see already I have a lower touch point here. So as I go through the monthly, I have to adjust this. That was the lowest price. As you can see, it came almost down to the beginning price, but we'll see as we go along. Now I have touch point A and touch point B, so I can come in with a steeper trend line here. I'll take my ray tool again, go to point B. So that's my new point A, and come over here to the next touch point, which is point B. And I keep doing that. I might need to adjust that just a little bit. I like to be precise with my trend lines. And if you want to be precise, you can use the magnet tool over here, which will drop it right down exactly to the candle that where you're holding your cursor. So, okay, I've got a little bit lower price there. You don't want any candles that cross through the trend line. That's why I'm adjusting that one. All right, then we can keep going over. Oh, and we got to the end. Is that the end already? July 26th. Okay. So see how easy that was? Now this one's a little bit off. There we go. So we have our upward trend line on the monthly chart. And it only took 2 trend lines. Now we need to go to our downward trend line, and we look for the previous high, the all-time high. And we didn't have that back here, so that would be in June of 2008. So I can zoom out a little bit and start at this all-time high and come down to my next touch point. You don't want any candles that cross the trend line. Then if they cross the trend line, then it's not valid. And that's my valid monthly trend line. So I go down to the weekly chart, and I do all of this again. Okay. Go back to the weekly, go back to where we started, and see if that's all correct. And it all looks good. All looks good. This is an easy one to do. Sometimes the currency or commodity that you're setting up might not be so easy. You might have quite a few trend lines. Okay, now, I need to adjust this one. This one's a little bit off. There we are, right on the candle. Now we see here on the weekly chart, I can come in a little bit steeper with my upward trend line, which I put right on that touch point there. and come over here to the next touch point, which is there. And that needs to be adjusted just a little bit, I think. Something looks a bit off. Let me change the color on that right quick. Upward trend line should be green in color. Oh, I see the problem. This one's a little bit off. You need to adjust these as you go through. Okay. So you see how clean and precise that looks. Then we come over here and let's see if I can come in a little bit steeper. And I can. Now, why don't I draw this up here? Because I will cross this trend line there. So I've got a trend line there. Touch point A, touch point B. All right, then I can come in steeper from touch point B, which is my new touch point A, and come up here to the current time. And it looks like a laser show, I know. So what about the upward trend, downward trend line? Yep, we can come in steeper there and come over here, change that color to red. There we go. And then we move down to the daily chart and we go back and see if our trend lines all look good. That's all, nothing crossing there. Oh, this one is a little bit off. Okay. And go back to our upward trend lines and see what we've got. And these are all good. Okay. And then we come over to our current time and let's see, we're on the daily chart. Oh, we need to adjust this one just a little bit. Right there. Okay, come to the daily chart. And it looks like we could come in steeper here. So I'll do the downward trend line from this touch point here. Yeah, okay. Now you want to be careful that you don't, it needs to be a valid trend line, okay? I mean, obviously if these candles weren't here and you only had this, that would not be a valid trend line. That's obviously, it's almost straight up and down. It's got to be a valid trend line and you're looking for at least 1 week's worth of data on your chart. And here we have, you know, multiple candles here, about 30 days. So we have 1 week's worth of data to make it valid. And I cannot come in any steeper here. Okay, I've only got 1 candle there. But let's go down to the 4 hour. Top-down analysis, remember? And we can go back and adjust our trend lines just a little bit. As you get more to your shorter time frames, you can be a little bit more precise. And you need to go back and bring these up to date. Same thing with this one down here. Okay. Now on the 4 hour, I see I can come in a little bit steeper also. So I'll grab my ray tool. And this touch point here. Sometimes they get a little bit close together, but as the price moves out, then you'll find that this might be quite far away, actually down here, or it might get crossed and then become invalid. So that's the 4 hour chart. Now let's go down to the 1 hour chart and see what we've got. Might need to make these a little bit more precise. Right there. Okay. Now the 4 hour chart, and I can come in steeper here with the downward trend line. And I'll do that with this one right here. Now I've got a real laser show here, eh? Okay. Now on the 4 hour chart, remember you want to have a week's worth of data. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days on this trend line. So can we come in steeper here? Not really. I would let this one unfold a little bit, maybe at least 3 more days before you can even get any kind of an idea of what that would be. We just put this one in here and you can see that's not really, okay, it does, looks like it works. Okay, looks like it's a valid trend line, but you want to be careful with this. You need lots of data to show you the direction and the trend, and we're not going to have a week's worth of data on here, which is what you really need to have if you're going to take if you're going to execute an order, a valid order. So I get rid of that one. And what I'll end up doing is just waiting and seeing. And these got so spread far apart because of this massive move that we had just on the day before yesterday. And that made these trend lines very, very far apart. But then this will probably start to come back down, and then we can put a more valid trend line in here. All right, so that's the top-down analysis. Now, for me, I trade on the 10-minute chart. You can use these on any time frame you want. Some people trade on the 5-minute. I've heard some people trade on the 1-minute. Just adjust that one a little bit. If I was trading on the 10-minute chart, now when I say you need a week's worth of data, you need a lot of data. On the 10-minute chart, really, I actually only need about 3 to 6 hours, because let's say on the 4-hour chart, you need a week's worth of data. That's 5 days. That's 24 candles. So on this chart, on the 10-minute chart, I have much more than 24 candles here. So I can easily come in with a steeper trend line here. So if you get confused about a week's worth of data, just remember you need about 24, 25 candles to make a valid trend line. Is that one correct? No, that one needs to move over just a little bit. There we go. And then this one down there. Now that looks better, more precise. Now we've got something I can work with here. This is could be a very valid executable trade coming next week. So you can see how simple it is to set up a trend line chart. And that's all that I have on my chart is trend lines. And that's what I use to execute my trades. Now, remember that it's a top-down analysis. Okay, monthly, weekly, daily, 4-hour, 1 hour, and then a shorter time frame if that's what you trade from. But how do you use the trend line strategy? How do you take trades? Where do you put your stop loss? Where do you execute the trades? Where do you get in? Where do you get out? All right, well, that's what I'll show you now. So let's go back to the chart. So here we are again on the Euro US on the 10-minute time frame. That's the time frame that I use for trading. And what would I do if I'm looking for a trade setup? I'm looking to execute a trade to open a buy or a sell trade. What I'm watching for, now this is on the weekend, so there's no prices moving. The candles are stationary. But on Monday when the market opens, this is what I will be looking for. If this should break below my trend line and close below the trend line, always wait for the candle to close. If it breaks below my green trend line and closes below the trend line, I take a sell trade on the very next candle. Okay, pretty easy, very simple, easy to follow. All right, now what if it starts to move up and then breaks above my red trend line and closes above my trend line? Always wait for the candle to close. If it breaks above and closes above my red trend line, I go long. I take a buy trade. And it's as simple as that. All right, so that's your entry. Where is your exit? All right, well, your exit is going to be at the opposite side. Let's say I go short here. The next candle breaks the trend line, closes below the trend line, and I go short right about in here. I would put my safety stop, my stop loss, just above the red line. And this would be then called my safety line. If I take a trade here below the green trend line, that's called my action line. So if I take a trade on the action line, then my stop loss goes above the safety line. Of course, you want to be sure that you don't have much distance between your action line and your safety line. In other words, you wouldn't take a short trade over here and then expect you have to put your stop loss above the safety line way up here. All right, this would not be a valid place to consider taking any kind of a trade because there's too much distance between your safety line and your action line. When it gets over in this area here, this is a really good position, and this is going to be a very, very interesting trade setup come Monday morning. So again, it breaks below the green trend line, the action line, I go short. It breaks above the red line, my safety line, then I go long. Of course, if it breaks above the red line, that's then called my action line, and then my green line would be my safety line. So if I do go long here, then I would put my stop loss below, and don't put it just right on the line. Okay, give it a little bit of breathing room. All right, and that just takes experience. Okay, it's a discretionary trade. You need to practice with this. It does take experience to know exactly where to put your stop loss. All right, so that's the entry point, and that's the stop loss. What about the take profit? Well, for the take profit, I use the support and resistance. All right, now we've got support here. We can see that. I'll just put a line on the chart. We've got support right there. Okay, it was two places where we had support during the day. So I could put my take profit right there. Let's say I go long, let's say I go short. That's a very close take profit, I understand, but we had a huge move up here. So we can go back here and look for a previous support and resistance zone. Looks like right there. Okay, so that would be my next take profit. So it's likely if it does break below this trend line and I go short, then at least it's going to come to the first support level. So that would be TP1, and then I could have TP2 here. So you can use whatever risk management protocol you want to, whether it gets down to here and you take partial profit, then you let the profit run. That's up to you how you manage your risk. But your take profit would be the first level of support. At least that's what I use, is support and resistance. And that's what all currencies and commodities do. They go from level to level to level. And support and resistance are those levels. All right, now if I was to go long, as we don't have any previous, if I was to go long right in here, I don't really have a previous high. All right, so you could use, let me zoom in a little bit here and see what I have. Way back here, we're very recent high prices. It's been a long time since it's been that high. So you could go back and find a level, maybe right in there. There's a good one. Okay, we can put that right there. So now we come back over here, and if it breaks above my red line and closes above the red line, then I go long. That would be my TP1 there, my first take profit. Again, using support and resistance for your take profit, whether it's a short trade or a long trade. So guys, that's how I set up the trendline strategy, and that's how I use the trendline strategy to implement my trades. And I know you will have some questions. It takes some time to get comfortable with it. You need to practice with it. There are some nuances that you learn how to tweak it a little bit. You learn how to use it. You get comfortable with using it. But I would highly suggest that you follow me on my live trading. I trade the Tokyo closing session on live YouTube, and I'll show you where I take my trades, how I take my trades, why I take the trades, where I put the stop loss and the take profit, all live action. So the link to my YouTube channel is below this video. So feel free to join at any time. You can ask questions during the live session, and I'm always commenting with everybody that's watching the live YouTube. So I hope this helped you a little bit to understand the trendline strategy that I use. And if you want to message me directly, the main messaging service that I use is Telegram. So you can get a hold of me on Telegram. My Telegram ID is @rickrayfx. Thanks again, wherever you are in the world. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again in the next video.